Hi everyone, it's Tanya and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to talk all about different editions of classics. And hopefully this video will help you to decide what edition of classics to buy. We have 19 different editions to talk about. So it's going to be a long video. Prepare yourself. Prepare yourself mentally and prepare yourself a cup of tea and let's dive right in. I have separated all the editions that I have for you today into 3 categories. The first category will be the cheaper options. So they are always like approximately under $10–11. The second category will be the middle price range, which is like under $20. And then the last category, the pricier options. So they usually cost more, slightly more than $20. Also, one more point is that today I am only going to talk about paperbacks. I will not be mentioning any of the hardbacks because I want to film a separate video for the hardback somewhere in the future. With no further ado, let's begin. Let's start with the cheaper options on the market. I have this many editions to talk about today. So let's start with the bigger ones. First of all, I have to show Dover thrift editions. They currently usually are like that, so they have like this blue top and they have a picture on the bottom. These editions, to be honest, are not my favorite. They are never my choice unless it's the only option. 2 of these books I got because I wanted to read them, but because I also knew that I want to make this video, so I got them in these editions. As for this book, for example, I could only find this in this edition, so if it's my only option I will buy the book, but if through some other options I will probably opt for something else. First of all, because I don't really like their design. I don't know, I don't like this like blue top. I don't think it's beautiful. Also with majority of the cheaper options, except like some exceptions which I will tell you about, but with majority of these books, do not expect any introduction, do not expect any notes. This is just the text of the work. The good thing about this is that you can just buy them, bring them wherever you want, you can ruin them, you will not feel guilty about it, you can write in them, like you can just tear them apart because they are so cheap and you will not feel bad about it. Also, they don't really look very beautifully on your shelf, so I don't think you will be missing them if you ruin them. So yeah, this is the good thing, that you can annotate, you can write in them, you can ruin them, you will not feel guilty about it. Now for the reading process. The main thing why I don't like these editions is because for me personally, they are very difficult to read. For me, the most important thing in a book, like I can forgive if the book is not floppy, I can deal with that, I can live with that. I can forgive if the cover is not very beautiful, I can live with that. Something I cannot forgive, I cannot enjoy a book if the font is too tiny and if the font is too close together and if it's too cramped. I just cannot enjoy the book. It's too hard for me. Also, I feel like it's very bad for your eyesight, and like I would better buy a more expensive book with a better type. And with these editions, they have very small font and the font is close together. It is a clean font, like I have to give them that, like it's a clean font, but you know there are some books with like very kind of messy type font. With this font, it's clean and it's quite easy to read, but it's close together and it's tiny. Not tiny, but small, quite small. I will insert like clips comparing font of this book with, for example, for the standard that I will compare other fonts to will be Penguin English Library, because in my opinion Penguin English Library has perfect fonts. And now, as you can see on the clip, this font is quite small. It's not that small, but it is close together and it's more difficult to read than Penguin English Library. Now let's have, so I was showing you An Ideal Husband Now let's have a look, for example, at yellow wallpaper font. It's pretty much the same size as the Ideal Husband, but as you can see, it is smaller. It is smaller than Penguin English Library. It is quite readable, but very close together in my opinion. Close together, not very comfortable. That was thrift editions. Or also as for like open, you can easily open them, like no problem. You can easily read them, no problem. You can open like that, you can see everything. So in terms of like the book itself, it's quite well made. If you don't mind small font, if you don't mind a font that is close together, if you don't mind the design, I would say go for it. They will probably even last you quite a long time, because I feel like their covers are quite durable, especially if you handle them carefully. But yeah, in my case, they're never my preferred edition. I don't like the design, I don't like their font, they don't have any introductions, don't have any notes. So that's like a turn off for me. Now, next edition of cheaper classics that you can find everywhere. It's very popular, a lot of people have it. You see it in many bookshops, is the Wordsworth classics. I personally prefer the design of these to this. I think this design is much better. They usually have very beautiful pictures on the front. They usually have like a small part of the picture here on the spine. So I personally prefer the design of these editions. The good thing about them is that they usually have an introduction. They have not a big one, not a very big one, but they do have a small introduction of like 10 pages approximately, and they do have, yes, they have some notes on the back. So for example, my Trumpet Major has notes and it has introductions. And then short stories don't have notes, but it does have introduction. So that's the good thing, that they have quite a lengthy, for such cheap editions, introduction. But something I want to mention as well, with Wordsworth Classic, if you're buying a translated work, keep in mind that they usually have old translation. So translation that, as far as I understand, does not have copyrights anymore, which is very difficult to read. It is very old. Be careful when buying translated works, especially like old translated works. Always check the translation and what people are saying about this translation, because translation can ruin your reading experience. So pay attention, because these books are cheap, so that's why they have free translations. Always keep in mind that. But if it's an English work, if it's something that was written initially in English, I would say go for it. They are also, I feel like they're quite durable. They are very bendable. You can easily open them. They're very easy to hold, to read. They're quite nice in your hand. They feel very nice in your hand. But again, for me, the problem is the font. That's the reason why I don't usually buy these editions, is the font. Again, it's clean. It's clean, very clear font, not messy, but it is small. So comparing it to Penguin English Library, you can clearly see that it's very small and it's very close together. And I do not like this. This is not my preferred option. I would go for a bigger font. That's an option for you if you want to have some additional information and you don't want to buy an expensive book. Okay, so now off to the babies, to the smaller editions. I will start with my least favorite, and then I will go to the editions, like more preferable editions. So out of the smaller ones, I would say that I only have one edition of Bantam Classics. I have the Around the World in 80 Days. These editions, first of all, again, they're cheap, so you will not feel guilty for ruining them. As for the reading experience, first of all, the cover is okay. I would say just it's okay. They have quite a few classics in this edition, so you can find some classics in them. But for the reading experience, just look at this page. Just have a look. Can you see how close to the bottom of the page the text is? Can you see how small the sides are. So if you want to annotate them, it's going to be difficult. You will have to use some sticky paper on the inside. The font again is quite small. It is clean but small. So for example, compare it to the Penguin English Library. You cannot compare. Penguin English Library is significantly bigger. As for the opening, you can open them quite easily. That's okay. I would say I don't have problems with that. They're very light. They're very easy to put in your bag and carry around. But yeah, I wouldn't go for them because of their tiny font. So these are my least favorite. Also, they don't have an introduction. They just have the text of the work. I would say choosing between these, for example, and this, definitely go for this because price is pretty much the same. Next, I have Collins Classics. With Collins Classics, I don't really like the design. I really don't like the design, to be honest. I don't think that this is beautiful, but again, it's my personal preferences. Some people might disagree, some people might like this black and white design, so it's just up to you. With Collins Classics, they are quite sturdy, to be honest. Like their cover, it's quite sturdy, so I feel like it will wear longer than, for example, Bantam Classics. So that's the good thing about them. This edition, for example, has like a tiny like 1-page introduction. And as for the Leaves of Grass, yeah, it does have tiny introduction, like 3 pages introduction. So they do have like tiny introductory material, but not something good, I would say. So yeah, the font is quite small, I would say, and also very close together, so it's like a big chunk of text, which looks a little bit intimidating, to be honest. If you look and compare it to Penguin English Library, I would say that actually here the size of the font looks pretty much the same, but the spacing is small compared to Penguin English Library. So maybe that's why it makes the text look smaller and more intimidating. But yeah, actually the size is comparable to Penguin English Library. But for example, if you look at the Leaves of Grass and compare it to Penguin English Library again, Leaves of Grass is smaller. The font is smaller. So, as you can see, even from the example of these 2 books, you cannot predict the font. So some books might have a bigger font, some books might have smaller font. So yeah, decide for yourself if you like these editions. I personally don't. I try to never opt for them. Again, I got these 2 to show you and to try Call of the Wild, for example. Yeah, this I just bought to show you. They were very cheap, so I got them. So yeah, Collins Library, decide for yourself. If I were you, I would opt for something else, just purely because I don't like close together font and I don't really like the design. Now we have Pocket Penguins. Pocket Penguins, this is an interesting thing because some of their editions are actually cheap. Like not cheap, they're not under $10, but they're like $11, some of them, at least like from what I saw. In yen. But some of them are very expensive. Some of them are like $20, and I don't know what's the deal with that. So if it's $20 book, I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't recommend it. I feel like it's not worth $20 unless you really like these editions, because they are colorful. I feel like they would look nice on your shelf because they have different colors. They have this pastel color, they have red, they have dark blue, orange, a lot of different colors. They're also very light and very easy to carry around. Their font is very nice as well. Like their font is quite big. Let's compare it to Penguin English Library. It's even bigger than Penguin English Library, for example, in this edition at least. The font here is very nice. It doesn't have an introduction. It has some font. It has some notes on the back, but no introduction. So, and notes not that many, so it doesn't have too much of an additional material. So yeah, if it's cheap, I would say go for it. If it's not, if it's like $20, I wouldn't go for that. I feel like there are better editions to buy for $20 than these. But yeah, they're very nice. They're very easy to hold. They're very light, quite beautiful. One more edition that I want to show you is the Scholastic Classics. They don't have too much of a choice, at least not currently, but you can always recognize them by this like color thrown onto the paper design. It's like just this sprinkles of color on the paper. They are nice. I quite like their spines because they will be like these bright colors. I'm not a big fan of this design, to be honest, but the font is beautiful. It's even bigger than Penguin English Library. The spacing is even bigger than Penguin English Library. I only have this copy to show, so I don't know if it's the situation with all the copies and like other books, but with this copy the font is beautiful. I don't know if it has to do with the fact that the book is for children. Probably it might, but it's really nice. However, it has no introduction and it has no notes, like no additional information, just the text. So yeah, decide for yourself. I will not be collecting these editions. I'm not a big fan, to be honest, but the font is beautiful. I will be reading this book because the font is so perfect. And I feel like it's going to be just a nice experience of reading it, but I don't think I will be collecting more of this. I'm not a big fan of the design. Besides, it has no additional information. Now off to my not preferred, because like I do not opt for these options usually, but if they are my only options, I would buy them. So why I'm saying they're kind of preferred? So first of all, I'm talking about I have two editions to show off. So one of them is the Signet Classics. I have 3 books in these editions. All 3 of these books, all 3 of them have an introduction. It's even not that short. For example, Winesburg, Ohio, it has like a 15-page introduction, and they also have afterword. So they have an introduction and an afterword, so that's nice. They have quite a bit of additional information, I would say, so that's what I like. Their designs are not my cup of tea, to be honest. Their spines do not match, so they will not decorate your shelf. Maybe only if you turn them like that, but even you see papers are different, so then your bookshelf will be like a zebra. But if you don't mind zebra on your bookshelf, then I guess it's the way to go. Now for the font. The font is actually all right. It differs. The font differs in every edition. For example, Winesburg, Ohio, Ohio, it has quite a big font. It is close together, but it is big. Like if you compare it to Penguin English Library, it's even bigger than Penguin English Library. They are also very light, very small, super easy to carry around. You will not worry to destroy them if you destroy them, because they're so cheap. So that's a good thing about them. If, for example, you look at, let's have a look at Nectar in Sieve. This font is smaller. This font is smaller than Winesburg, Ohio, and if you compare it to Penguin English Library, it is maybe the same size, a little bit smaller than Penguin English Library, but very close together. Very close together. So this book is going to be difficult to read, for example. As for the Lysistrata, this font is, I would say, comfortable to read, and because it's a play, the spacing is quite nice, I would say, because it's a play. I've already read this book and it was easy to read for me, so I didn't mind the font, for example. Also easy to open, can read easily. Yeah, they do not wear very well, because, for example, my edition here of Lysistrata, it already has a band, and here and here on the side. And I am usually very careful with my books. Like I read carefully, so some of them were already damaged in, like this, for example. It already came, I don't know if you can see it, but here I have like a here bent. So I wouldn't say that they wear very nicely, but I don't think that they have to, because they're so cheap. So yeah, definitely if you want a cheap edition with some longer introduction and afterword, I would say yeah, you can try this and see for yourself. The last edition, which I think might be my favorite, but it's mostly for like children's classics, I think, is the Puffin Classics. They usually have very nice design, at least for me. Like I like this cartoonistic kind of drawn design. I think it's nice and heartwarming. Besides it, most of their books are like children's classics. I have an edition of Anne of Green Gables. It has no introduction, but it does have some notes on the back. It has glossary. It has a little bit of information about the author, and it also has a section that like some things to think about and some things to do. So like you know, something to think about after reading this book. So that's nice. Their font, there's nothing I could ask for. It's big and the spacing is very nice. If you compare it to Penguin English Library, it's bigger than Penguin English Library. They are super comfortable to read. They are super floppy as well. You can open, no problem. They're just very nicely made books. And they're also quite cheap, like they're under $10. At least like when I was buying this, it was under $10. So definitely if you find an edition, if you find your novel in this edition and you want to save up some money, I would say go for it. The reading experience going to be very comfortable. You might have maybe look something up on the internet if you're interested, but those are children classics. However, they do have like Odyssey, for example. With Odyssey you would want some additional material. Also, I don't know if their Odyssey is abridged or not, so that's something you have to check. But for example, Anne of Green Gables is unabridged, so that's nice. And I really enjoyed my reading experience with this book. I was carrying it around in my bag. It was all very nice. So there you have it, the cheaper options. To sum it all up, out of the cheaper options, the options that I would recommend, like I wouldn't recommend opting for them if you can afford something more expensive and better. But if you cannot really and you have to choose from this price range, I would suggest go for Wordsworth Classics, because they have introductions and they have notes. So these editions. Also, I would say Puffin editions, no introductions, no notes, but super comfortable reading experience. And I would say Signet Classics are also quite good. You cannot predict the font, but they have introductions and they have afterwards, so which is nice. So yeah, I would say that these three would be my recommendation. Also Pocket English, but they don't have any additional information, and sometimes they can be quite pricey, and if they're pricey I wouldn't opt for this. So these were the cheaper options. Now off to the middle price range, the middle price range category, which I would personally recommend a lot of these editions. They're quite affordable, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them have good information. So let's start with one edition which is kind of in between cheap category and middle price category. This is Evergreen Classics. These editions, they're very sturdy. Their price, first of all, their price is around $11–12, depending on different novel. For example, it can be like $13–14, I guess, if I translated correctly from yen. So they are quite affordable. This edition does have some notes on the back, and it also has H.G. Wells's life. So it describes his biography in quite a bit of pages, quite a few pages. So they do have some a little bit of additional information, which is also nice. Their cover is made of this like rubbery kind of material, which Penguin English Library used to have, but it's like a little bit even sturdier than Penguin English Library. They aren't maybe they're quite of okay. You can open them, they open quite nicely. Their font is nice, their font is quite good. If you compare it to Penguin English Library, it's pretty much the same as Penguin English Library. Paper here is better than in Penguin English Library. It's thicker and it's whiter. So I would say that they're very nicely made. One more good bonus is that they have quite a few Russian classics. I was pleasantly surprised to see Gogol. I was pleasantly surprised to see Chekhov. I even saw Hero of Our Time, Double by Dostoevsky, Dead Souls by Gogol. So yeah, they have quite a few Russian titles, which was very nice to see. Their designs are always like this kind of chunky designs, which are not my cup of tea, but some of you might enjoy. Their covers are all usually colorful, which I personally like. The spines is quite colorful, so I would say they're a good option to go. They're quite beautiful, quite affordable, nicely made, so I think they will last quite long, of course, if you're careful with them. So yeah, I would say that's an option to go. One more edition, which I only have one book of, and I honestly just bought this book because the edition was so beautiful. I'm not really interested in the author, but just the edition kind of called me, and I'm like, okay, I will try the author just because the edition is so beautiful. So I'm talking about, what are they called? Legend Press, Legend Classics. I have a copy of F. Scott Fitzgerald, This Side of Paradise. I don't know, I feel like F. Scott Fitzgerald, he has never called my name. Like I've never been very much interested in him, but now that I have this copy, I will give it a try. This edition is also quite nicely made. It's very light. The paper is this, like, it's quite a thick paper, but it's like a dark, this newspaper color paper. The font is big. The font is very comfortable to read. It's very big. It's even bigger than Penguin English Library, to be honest. Yes, it's bigger than Penguin English Library. Let's see if it has an introduction. It has no introduction, and it has no notes. So it's just the text of the work itself. They don't have too many titles, so maybe for some of them, maybe you would not need a lot of notes. Up to you. I prefer to have notes, but just this was so beautiful. This was so beautiful, so I bought it. They are also on like a cheaper side of middle price range books. So yeah, I would say if you don't need any additional information, they are a way to go. I think that this looks beautiful. Now off to like more well-known editions that a lot of people have and a lot of people buy and love. So let's start with Penguin Black Spines. I am not a fan, like they are not my preferred choice. Like if I can find a different edition, I will probably choose a different edition. Like we will talk about, because currently I kind of prefer to buy more expensive options, but if I cannot find an expensive option, I will opt for this, because they are, from the point of view of a reader, from the point of view of reading experience, they're perfect. They are not very beautiful. Like I don't like this on my shelf. It's very grim, it's very dark. I don't like this on my shelf, so that's why I don't buy it. Also, they don't wear very well. Like they get spoiled very fast. Like for example, look here, I haven't read this book yet, I just bought it, but it's already has like some white wearing on the bottom, so they don't wear very nicely. But the good thing, I will hold just one. Okay, this is beautiful. The good thing about them, I quite like their cover design. Like their cover designs are beautiful. The pictures are beautiful. I like everything about the cover. I just don't like the spine. The good thing about these editions is that they always have a lot of additional information. For example, Enter the Trollops Dr. Wortle's School has an introduction, quite a lengthy one, has notes, further reading. Then it has the text of the work, and then it has notes on the back as well. So they usually have a lot of additional information, which is very helpful. Also, they're floppy, you can easily open them, read them with no problem. They have good space on the side for those of you who like to annotate. Their font, I would say, often a little bit on the smaller side, but it has a good spacing. Like, for example, if you compare the font from Dr. Wortle's school, if you compare it to Penguin English Library, it is smaller. It is visibly smaller, but the spacing is nice, so hopefully it will be quite easy to read. So that's also kind of drawback for me, small font. But apart from that, I would say that these editions are very nice. If, for example, even if you look at Alexandre Dumas Count of Monte Cristo, which we will start reading soon in the BBB book club, this edition actually has a bigger font than Dr. Wortle's school, and it's comfortable. It's really comfortable. It's the same size as Penguin English Library, and it's perfect. Like, I cannot ask for more. And even this big book you can still open quite all right, read it quite easily. This chunky book. So yeah, I would say that if you don't mind the spines, if you don't mind like sometimes small font but with good spacing, I would say these editions are very good. I like them. I like their notes. I like their information edition. I really appreciate these editions. Also Penguin, they're so prolific with their publishing. Like, you can find so many classics in these editions. Pretty much any classic you are looking for in English language. Not all translated classics, like they don't have a lot of Russian classics, for example. They have like the most famous ones, I guess. They not always have all of the Russian classics, but obviously like Russian classics is enormous. Like, you cannot, yeah, they don't have a lot of Russian classics. They have quite a few Russian classics too, actually, but the more well-known titles. But still, English classics, for example, they publish a lot of also foreign works like Gogi Wan Yongo. You can find a lot of books in these editions, a lot. And that is so wonderful. I love them for it. I love them for it, that they're translating so many books, and they have so many different translations. Like, for example, they have a lot of different translations of Don Quixote, different translations of the Iliad, and like ancient literature. So I love them for it. This is a great choice. It's just that if I can find something else, I would opt for something else. But this is also a solid choice. Now off to, I think, the most beloved editions, at least like on BookTube or Bookstagram. It's of course Penguin English Library editions. I love them too. To be honest, at first I wasn't a big fan of their cover designs, but they grew on me. To be honest, they grew on me, and now I really like these editions. They are very affordable, super easy to read. They're so comfortable, just perfect to read. Their spines are beautiful. I love their spines. They look stunning on the shelf. You can see them here. They look beautiful. Like I have already said, in my opinion, they have perfect font. They are easy to open, no problem with opening. They don't have an introduction. They don't usually have notes, but they always have an afterword. Always. All of my editions have afterword in them. So they do have a little bit of an additional information, which is nice. So yeah, I love this. Something else to say about them is that Penguin English Library have two kinds of books. So they have an older versions and they have newer versions. I personally prefer older versions because their covers are sturdier. Their covers, they have this like rubbery material, and they also have picture of the author on the flop, and I really like this. They don't have it anymore in the newer versions. Newer versions are, the cover is made just of like paper, a little bit more sturdier paper than the paper of the pages. So that's a little bit of a drawback. They're not as wearable, but I am personally careful with my books, so like they look all right for me, but yeah, you have to be careful. These editions are sturdier in my opinion, and they also, yeah, I love Penguin English Library. They are Penguin English Library. Their books are written in English language, so it's like English American literature. They're like currently starting to publish also more of American novels, but you will not find translated works in these editions, which is, I don't mind. I will buy translated works in other editions. I kind of like this division that, for example, Penguin English Library is only for English works, and then with this I can have my translated works in like kind of black spines, for example. So yeah, Penguin English Library is definitely a solid choice to go. I love these editions. I love them. I love collecting them. I think they make my bookshelf look nice. They give me a very comfortable and nice reading experience. So yeah, I really like these editions. Now off to the last Penguin that I want to show you. And this is Penguin Modern Classics. They have this like minty spines. I like them. I think they're so bright and just fresh. They kind of give a fresh feeling to my bookshelves. I like this. I like these editions. However, with these editions, they publish like modern works, translated and English works, so they have enormous amount of books to choose from, which is very exciting for me. The drawback of these editions is that they don't really have an introduction, and they don't have afterword. They don't have like any additional information. It's just the text of the work itself. I don't know what it's related to, why it's like that. Maybe because they're modern works, maybe there isn't too much of critique on them currently. I don't know what it's related to. Maybe there hasn't been too much study done on these works. Maybe that's the reason. But yeah, they usually don't have any additional information, just the work itself. So if you want to know more about the author, if you want to understand more about, for example, the culture, like for example Chinua Achebe, he's writing about Nigeria. So if you want to know more, you will have to Google it. But yeah, other than that, also their fonts. Their fonts you can never predict, you can never guess. For example, Arrow of God has quite a comfortable font. You can compare it to Penguin English Library. It's a little bit smaller than Penguin English Library, but it's pretty much the same. It's also good spacing. Narcissus and Goldmund, for example, has huge font. Huge! It's bigger than Penguin English Library. It has very good spacing. It's very comfortable to read. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy the book. I still, you see, I kind of put it down. I haven't officially DNF'd it. Officially, I haven't, but I just put it down. I'm like, I'm not in the mood for this currently. So, but I personally really like the covers, especially for Hermann Hesse's. Actually, also Chinua Achebe. I also really like the covers. I really like their cover work design. I just adore it. I feel like it's so beautiful, and like it's really well thought through. Like I finished Damien, also wasn't a fan of the book, but I look at the cover design and I see why it's this. I understand this cover. I can tell that the author has read the book and just beautifully represented it on this piece of art. I love it. I love it. I feel like their covers are really on point. Fonts you can never guess. They are usually comfortable, but some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. For example, A Grain of Wheat by Gogi Wanyongo. The font is quite small. It's smaller than Penguin English Library, but the spacing is nice. So I would say it's still going to be a quite comfortable reading experience. Also, they're quite floppy. You can easily open them, you can read them. They have space on the side, so you can annotate if you want. So yeah, I would say these editions are comfortable to read. Like Penguin currently are making very comfortable editions. I don't own any of Penguin's like old editions, don't have any of them because I don't like them. They have very small fonts and all of their fonts are so cramped together. So I saw these editions on like second-hand bookshops. I never bought a single one because I know that I'm not going to read that. The fonts, I cannot forgive tiny close together fonts. I just cannot. And those fonts are like tiny. They're even smaller than Wordsworth classics, I think, if I remember correctly. I don't own those books. So yeah, currently the books that Penguin is making currently, I would highly recommend. I think they're really nicely made. Again, something to note is that, like, in newer versions, again, the cover is just paper, a little bit more sturdy than the paper of the pages, but it's still paper. For example, this edition, it's like this, can you see? It has like a plastic, like a small layer of plastic on here. And some of, like, for example, Hermann Hesse doesn't have that. You see? It's just the paper. So yeah, I like these editions. I would recommend them. I think they're very nice, and I like how they look on your shelf. Now off to some other editions that are not Penguin. First of all, I want to show you Oxford Classics. Because also they publish a lot of titles, especially like old classics. They publish old classics, like classical literature. They also have just like ancient literature, not necessarily Greek or Roman. They have Mesopotamian myth, for example. They have ancient Egypt's story. I saw 2 books. So they publish also a lot of titles. They have, like, that's beautiful. I like that. However, I also am not a big fan of these editions. If I can find a work I want in a different edition, I will opt probably for something else, because it's not of the, I quite like their design. Like, to be honest, I quite enjoy their designs. I like their covers. I like that their spines are white rather than black. They always have very good additional information. They have introductions, glossaries, notes, what have you. They have that all. Why I don't always opt for them? Because the fonts. They often have ridiculous fonts, just ridiculous. Like, for example, I was reading Charlotte Bronte's Selected Letters. The letters are written in a tiny font. Like, compare it to Penguin English Library. The font is tiny. The spacing is nice, but the font is tiny. It's tinier than all of the Penguins I've shown you. It's even tinier than the cheaper editions I've shown you. The font is tiny, but then if you look on the notes, the font there is even smaller. And when I was reading this book, my eyes were aching, like literally aching. I had pain in my eyes after reading this book for just like 2 hours. It was terrible. It was just a terrible reading experience for me, and I cannot forgive it to a book. How you expect me to read a book if my eyes are aching? Like, how? So yeah, that's why, like, I don't opt for them. They are easy to open, easy to hold. They're very light to hold. Everything about them is wonderful, except for this one drawback, which for me is huge. Tiny font for me is a huge drawback. It's not always the case. Like, for example, if you look at my copy of Tiagoni and Works and Days by Hesiod, this is perfect. Like, this font, this spacing is perfect. If all of their books were printed like that, if all of their books had this font, I would have no problem with these editions. I would have no problems whatsoever. I would be buying them, I would be reading them, I would be loving them. But unfortunately, their fonts, more often than not, I feel like it's only, that's what I have is like good, really good font. I also have, for example, the Iliad by Homer. The translation is quite good here from what I learned, but again, the font, just have a look at it. First of all, it's messy. This is what I call like a messy font. It's very difficult for me to read. I don't like this. It's hard for me to read. Also, it's super close together. So yeah, it's not, I can already tell that it's not going to be a pleasant experience, but it was the only copy with this translation that I could find, so it was my only option. I also have Wilkie Collins' The Dead Secret in this edition. Again, the font is quite small. It's not tiny. It's not tiny, it's bigger than Charlotte Bronte's letters, but it is messy. and it's not that well spaced. So their fonts, like, you can never predict. You can never predict. And more often than not, from the books that I have received from them, often their fonts are really either messy or small or cramped or all of it together. So I try not to buy these editions if I can find a different option. However, they always have very good introductions and they always have nice notes. So that's a shame. That's a shame. Oxford, if you are watching this video, can you please step up your game for the fonts? I love your editions. I love the designs. I love all the notes. Translations sometimes are old, like that's also something you have to keep in mind. I think because they don't have much funding, they often opt, like for example, their translation of Don Quixote was an old translation, which is for modern reader is difficult to read. I forgot the name of the translator, but it was an old, like from the 18th century, and some people who were reading Don Quixote with us in our baby book club, they gave up because the translation was really hard to read, and translation can really ruin your experience. So, and they often publish like older translations, I think, that don't have copyright either. So yeah, but for example, their translation of the Iliad, I read in some comments that this is actually a good translation by Robert Fitzgerald. That's quite a good translation. So you just have to check your translations. But yeah, Penguin, please, not Penguin, Oxford, please step up your game with the font. One more edition which is quite popular is this Red Spines, vintage Red Spines edition. I quite like them, to be honest. Usually this was a black sheep. This was the exception from the rule. I don't like this cover, don't like it. But usually they have quite good covers. Their covers I always enjoy, and they have like different artists, different cover artists for different authors. The books are quite nicely made, like they are easy, they're light, you can easily open them and read. They have good spaces on the sides, they have good fonts, which is important to me, as we have already learned. They have very comfortable fonts, like for example Cider with Rosie. Compare it to Penguin English Library, it's even bigger than Penguin English Library. So this font is very comfortable. They even sometimes have illustrations, like for example again Cider with Rosie has. So I like these editions. They don't always have the same fonts. Like for example, if you look at the Gospel of Jesus Christ by José Saramago, this font, but it's also José Saramago's writing, because from what I know, he didn't separate his text into paragraphs, so it's just like the way he wrote it is just a big chunk of text, so it looks a little bit intimidating. Can you see this? Like, can you see this? But yeah, this font is a little bit on the smaller side. It's in this book, it's smaller than Penguin English Library, but the spacing is nice. So you cannot always predict their fonts. For example, Magus has a good font, comfortable font, quite big one, maybe a little bit bigger than Penguin English Library. So yeah, you cannot predict their fonts. Something you need to keep in mind: they don't have introductions, they don't have any notes, they don't have any afterword. Odyssey by Homer in this edition, no introduction, no notes, nothing, just the text of the work. So that's something to keep in mind. If you need notes, if you need introductions and afterwards, this is not an option for you. But if you just want the text, I would say go for it. I like these editions. They look beautiful. They look beautiful on your shelf. Usually they're comfortable to read in my experience. Books that I own, they have quite a comfortable text. Actually, let's have a look at another Saramago. Look, you see, that's what I'm saying. You can never predict. For example, Gospel of Jesus Christ, The Double by José Saramago. This is a perfect font for me. Like, this is very comfortable, perfect spacing, very nice. And compare it to the Gospel of Jesus Christ, which is much smaller. So you can never predict. You don't know what font you will get with them, but usually I would say they're comfortable. Also, my edition of Brighton Rock has very comfortable font. Like, I love these fonts. Like, these fonts are everything. They're very comfortable usually, except for the Gospel of Jesus Christ. The last editions of middle price range that I want to show you are these Virago Modern Classics, which I like. I like their spines. I think they look beautiful. I like this green color. I like their cover designs. You see, they're also different. So this is, for example, Sylvia Townsend Warner. Covers are kind of match, and this is a different author, so this is a different cover. These editions are very comfortable. I love them. They have huge font. This font is enormous. Let's see if all of them do. Yes, they all have big fonts. Yes, they all have big fonts. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. That's what we need. A very big font, bigger than Penguin English Library. Perfect spacing, very nice, easy to open, easy to read, good. They have a lot of spaces on the sides here, so you can annotate your books. Wonderful. Most of their titles are not like old classics, it's Virago Modern Classics, so it's like sometimes you can find kind of like forgotten works, I guess, that are not very widely spoken about, not very widely known. So that's good. But yeah, you will not find like old classics in these editions. But if you find a title that is published in this edition, I would say go for it, because these editions are really nice. I like them a lot. They're very comfortable from the point of view of a reader. One thing to say about them is that they don't really have a whole lot of additional information. They do have an introduction. They do have an introduction in the beginning. It's quite short, but it is there. But there will be no notes, no afterword. So that's something to know about them. Maybe again it has something to do with the fact that these works hasn't been studied too much, because they're like recent, some of them are forgotten. Maybe that's the reason, I don't know. But yeah, they have this like short introductions. So these were the editions for middle price range. And now off to my favorite, currently favorite, because I try to opt for these like more expensive editions, because they are like perfect in my opinion. So now off to the pricier options of paperbacks for classics. Now this is my favorite category, the pricier options. I love all of these editions dearly, some of them more than others. So let's jump right in. First of all, I will start, I think, with the most famous ones, and that are quite popular. That is Penguin Deluxe editions. I love them. I don't have a whole bunch of them. This is like the only 3 that I have, but I love all of them. I think they're beautiful. I don't love all of their cover designs, to be honest, so the cover designs that I don't like, I don't buy, but the ones that I do like, I really do enjoy them. For example, I have Dubliners and the Iliad and the Odyssey. I'm also going to get the Aeneid, not sure how to pronounce Aeneid, also in this edition. They have good translations. For example, this is translation by Robert Fagles, and it's one of more popular translations these days, because it's readable, it's in verse, and it's a very good translation. So they have good translations. I like this cover design. Something that not everybody might like is the deckled edges, because all of them have deckled edges. I don't mind deckled edges. I not love, but like I'm okay with them. They don't bother me. They're quite nice. I'm okay. It's okay with me, like I don't mind. Their fonts is a blessing. Their fonts, they just make me happy because they are perfect. They are definitely bigger than Penguin English Library. They're super comfortable to read, to hold. It's just going to be, I just know in advance it's going to be a wonderful reading experience. They always have long introductions, like 30-20 pages introductions. They have lots and lots of notes and appendixes on the back. So they have so many different additional information, which I really do appreciate. So these editions, I love them. If I like the cover, their spines don't really match, as you can see, that they don't really match all together, but it's okay. I keep them in different shelves of my bookshelf, so it doesn't really bother me. But yeah, these editions are wonderful. I feel like they provide a very good reading experience. Like I said, yeah, beautiful font, open easily, good spaces here and there and everywhere. So I love these editions. I would definitely highly recommend them. I will definitely be getting more of them myself. So yeah, Penguin Deluxe editions, I personally love them. Then we have maybe not as popular edition, but still you can see a lot of these books, and this is the Modern Library Classics. These editions, I wouldn't say that they're my favorite. I wouldn't opt for them like if I have other options, but they're also quite good. To be honest, you see they don't have, it's the pages, and so they have very little space on the side. Like these are the pages. The space is right here, so they don't have much space to annotate. I have only one book in this edition. It's the Journal of the Plague Years. It has very short introduction, but I don't know if this book need like a lot of additional material, because it is a journal of Daniel Defoe of the Plague Years, like just his diary. It has some notes on the back, just like a few pages of notes. So yeah, it has some additional information. I think it's more like from a cheaper side of pricier options, so it's a little bit cheaper than others. But yeah, I would say they're nice. They're quite good. The font is comfortable for me to read. Perfectly comfortable. I have no problems with the font. Open, read, no problem. Maybe not very durable because the cover is just the paper, but quite a thick paper, to be honest. So yeah, maybe not exactly very durable, but they're also not exactly very pricey. They are more like something in between middle price range and expensive. They're definitely cheaper than the Penguin Deluxe edition, so they're like somewhere in between middle and expensive price range. Again, because different editions also differ, like certain novel can cost more, certain novel can cost less. So I cannot really like say that all of them are cheap or expensive. So yeah, but I just decided to put them in a more expensive category because prices that I saw, at least on Book Depository, were like more expensive prices, but not significantly. So yeah, the price question is difficult to predict. Now I have some new edition that I wanted to try. This is the Broadview Classics. This edition caught my eye because I really like their cover designs. Like their cover designs are always like black and white photographs of people, or like in this case, this is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And I feel like the cover looks very classy. I like this like white square here. I feel like it looks very classy. I really like their cover designs. I'm not a big fan of their spines because they're black, and like I said, I don't want my bookshelves to be black. Their font is a little bit, it's comfortable, but it is on the smaller side. It's smaller than Penguin English Library. Maybe not so that smaller, maybe just a little bit smaller, but not significantly. So it is comfortable to read. They're quite floppy. You can open them. They have a bunch of appendixes on the back. They have like maps. They have Appendix A. The last appendix is Appendix I. So appendix and all of the Appendix A, Appendix B, Appendix C, and all of the like appendixes. The last is Appendix I, so you can tell how many appendixes they have. So they have geographical remoteness and cultural differences. They have early reviews of this novel. They have like modern reviews. So they have, yeah, a lot of different interesting material about the novels, and of course also the text of the novel. And do they have an introduction? And there is also an introduction here. So they have, yeah, they have a lot of material, and I really like it. They are maybe not very durable because the cover, like this cover, is a little bit like bendy and not very sturdy. But yeah, I think they're beautiful, and if care and if handle them carefully, I think they could last quite long. So yeah, Broadview editions, I really like them. And my favorite part is their cover design, to be honest. Now the some of my like top favorite, like I just love these editions, it's the Norton Critical editions. I like them. I like their current design better. I don't like their old design. I don't own any books in their old design, but their current design I think is quite nice. I like this big picture and then the name of the book and the author. I think it's nice. The thing, for some, I don't know why, but for some reason, can you see that? For some reason Mark Twain is taller. I don't know, so they will not match. But I also keep them like kind of in different places. Like these books I keep with my ancient literature. But yeah, I don't know if all of them are in different sizes. But apart from that, I like them. They have a whole bunch of additional materials. They're also floppy, you can open easily. The font is a little bit on the smaller side and a little bit on the closer together side, I have to acknowledge it. But for example, this is a play and it's like in verse, so it doesn't really matter too much. With Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, the font is comfortable. It's not huge, maybe a little bit smaller than Penguin English Library, but it's comfortable. The spacing is comfortable. The book for some reason is very nice to hold in hand, at least for me. It has some original illustrations of the book, which I really enjoy. So yeah, this book I really like, and a whole lot of additional materials. Like I will tell you what additional materials they have. So they have contexts and sources, Mark Twain letters about Huckleberry Finn, then they have an extract from autobiography, they have some early responses, they have some critique on the book, so that's really nice. Notes on the text, preface to the third edition. Don't have like a lengthy introduction. Yeah, so here they have criticism, early responses, modern views, so that's really interesting. I really like it. Also for Gilgamesh, for example, I have an edition of Gilgamesh. They have some notes, a glossary. They have glossary because Gilgamesh has a few versions. They have this few versions of the book. Criticism and responses, so critical approaches to Epic of Gilgamesh. And then they have some articles by different people on the topic of Gilgamesh, glossary, selected biography, the text of the epic. In this case, they have like an introduction. So the text of, yeah, they have, in this case of this book, they have quite a lengthy introduction of like approximately 20 pages, because I feel like this book does require an introduction, just the historical context, and because it has so many different variants, so it does need an introduction. So yeah, I really like these editions. Norton Critical editions, definitely they're ones of my favorite, and if I can find a novel in these editions, I will buy it in these editions. And now the last two editions, which I really like. They are not classics, like they don't, some of them do publish old classics, like sometimes you can find old classics in these editions, but I feel like they publish more like lesser known works, like New York Review books, classics. I really like these editions. They're like perfect, they're beautiful, the cover is quite sturdy, so they're wearing well. They're also end pages are like colored. Font is super comfortable to read, it's big, super comfortable. I love them. They have an introduction, no notes on the back, but this book is like modern book, so maybe there isn't much notes to put. So yeah, I really like these editions. And the last edition that I want to show off is the Apollo editions. I saw some like even Russian classics in these editions, so I think that they publish lesser known works and mostly translated works. So for example, this is Ivo Andrić, Bosnian Chronicles, so he is a Serbian author, I think. So I love these editions. They're beautiful also because look at these end papers. Their covers are beautiful, their font is very comfortable to read. Do they have an introduction? They have a short introduction. glossary, some, yeah, but not much of glossary, not much of notes, but I also love them. So Apollo classics, Apollo editions are also very beautiful, and I love them a lot. So yeah, there you have it, guys, all the editions of classics that I wanted to show you. Hopefully now you know what editions of classics to buy and what editions to collect your classics in. Hopefully it was interesting and informative. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Have a very good day, and I will see you soon in my next videos. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.